We are living through the most profound shift in how humans learn since the invention of language. I'm Lisa Wisner, Open Sesame's talent and workplace culture portfolio lead. And today I am so excited to be in a conversation with you all about sort of like a reminder to you, right? That the real purpose of technology isn't to replace us, it's to reveal and elevate what makes us truly human. And as your future of work partner and AI safety strategist, I am someone who deeply cares about not only the future of learning, but a future that's built on trust, transparency, and human intelligence enhanced by today's conversation, artificial intelligence. And so today, so excited that we have the opportunity to join forces with an amazing organization, D2L, Desire to Learn. And I am joined by a pioneer in the space of learning and development, Sandy Resendiz. I am so excited that Sandy's here. Sandy is the head of corporate learning and development at D2L and one of the most respected learning leaders in the world. Welcome, Sandy. We're so happy you're here with us.
Oh, thank you for that lovely introduction, Lisa. How are you this morning?
I am doing fantastic. It's a bit windy where I am. I feel like, the weather is shifting, things are shifting around the universe, but it kind of fits perfectly for this, major technological transformation that we're in. I feel like you got to be ready, right? You got to be ready for all the shifts that are happening. And I know, Sandy, you have been in this space not only as a mentor, but also a visionary. You have so much wisdom to share. And so I already know that today's conversation is not just going to be about learning and development. It's also going to be about the future that we're creating together. Does that get you excited, Sandy?
It really does. I think there's so much ahead of us and so much we can draw from the past, but so much that we're going to be experiencing in this next, time of traumatic change.
Yes, for sure. And I couldn't be more honored to share this space with you. And so let's go ahead and just dive straight in. I just have to say, I am completely floored and honored to be here with you because of your career. I feel like we can gladly say it's legendary. You have guided organizations through so many major transformations. We joked during rehearsal, right? You've gone from the dawn of the digital revolution to now where we are with the rise of AI. And I definitely want to make sure that we get that historical lens, right? You've seen how each wave of technology may have shaped us, how we're learning, right? So specifically thinking about learning and development. Let's start there, right? Looking back at your journey, what's it been like, right? Leading through all of these transformations.
Yeah, Lisa, I started so many years ago, and I will disclose that I started even before the rise of the internet. So I started my career teaching classes in as a facilitator out of a three-ring binder. So very old school. And I have seen the early days of the internet. My early days as a facilitator were about helping people learn how to use email and spreadsheets. So very early days. And even back then, there was just this kind of healthy skepticism about, was this really going to change, the workforce? Was it really going to change the world? And we can see now that, those 25 years have evolved into something unprecedented and unimaginable from where we were and where we started. So I look at AI as very much a similar path that we're about to take on. And I'm excited about it. I also know that there are places we can't imagine and places that we have to thoughtfully kind of keep ourselves around as we kind of move forward into this fairly uncharted space.
Yeah, most definitely. When you mentioned three-ring binders as the learning modality right before the internet, I
Yeah.
I just thought this is so wild, right? That you're getting to experience learning and development through every new technology. Literally, you are living the disruption. And I feel like this is the perfect time to also mention, like I recently read an article by Sherm that reinforces that our 2025 workplace technology is really not just about humans using AI. Right now, it feels like people are panicking and going, okay, how are we going to use AI, right? But it's really about advancing humanity, right? Through all the digital transformations that have happened, thinking about not only automation, but also digital learning. And so when you mentioned binders, right, it makes me think about when people were talking about how don't give the kids calculators because math will be forgotten, right? And it's like, no, I mean, we are expanding and we're growing and we have gone way beyond that. And so I want to anchor our next topic, right? Our next conversation to really talk about how technology, the evolution of technology has shaped how we learn. You've seen organizations adopt everything from, like you mentioned, right? Those three-ring binders before the internet, now from e-learning to virtual classrooms. And now we're talking about AI-driven learning ecosystems. We're talking about augmented learning. We're talking about AI agents, right? There's so much going on. What are you seeing going on? Like, what's staying constant through it all? Maybe what's changing?
I think one of the biggest transformations I'm seeing is this move to building continuous capability, right? So moving from learning equals training, which equals an event,
Hmm.
to how do we embed this into the whole flow of working, right? So as you are moving through your day, as you're moving through your career, how are you embedding this kind of AI experience throughout? And it's not just AI, AI enables this kind of continuous learning. I'm seeing some amazing technologies, which we can talk about, but things like virtual reality that, maybe even 10 years or 15 years ago was being bandied about, but there wasn't that embracement of that technology. Now I'm hearing it in a much different way. I'm seeing it in a much different way. Virtual coaching. There's so much happening right now. I just lots for us
Hmm.
to unpack today.
There is a lot. And the picture you're painting for me is sort of like this wave, right? Like maybe if we're in the ocean, maybe it's some, low tide, right? We're talking about low tide. But I think at some point, these technologies, right? The early adopters are there in the low tide figuring things out. But I feel like technology sometimes kind of eventually comes like a big wave, right? And if you weren't playing around in those, low tide waves, you will get pushed aside, right? And the data actually speaks about this, right? There's so many. I mean, you can go and Google this, yeah. Oh, you can chat GPT this for yourselves. The Harvard Business Review talks about how it's important to make sure that you are at the forefront of every major shift in technology. And so for me, this conversation about learning and development is not just so much about upgrading our skills, it's being in the game, right? Staying in the game because we don't know what the big wave is going to be that shifts everything. But if you're not in the game, you're going to get pushed aside, right, Sandy?
Absolutely. And, I was at a conference 2 weeks ago, and there was an amazing keynote speaker who said, start building your own, backpack of tools, even if your company isn't there yet. And we understand lots of companies have to move at a very different pace due to, risk and information security and technology, et cetera. But even if that's not the case, there's plenty of opportunity for you to build up your skills
Yeah.
offline, keeping your company's information confidential and all of those things. But there's a lot available to us now that you can play off the side of your desk
Mhm.
and really get to be comfortable with what's happening. There's just so much available. And especially we as learning and development professionals, we really need to kind of get that oxygen mask on and put it on ourselves first, right? So that we are able then to help everybody else once that technology is available for your broader company. And if you are in an organization where they're embracing it, like my own at D2L, you really then have to just stay at the front of this, right? Because if you're not in front of it, certainly your employees are going to be right there with you or passing you. So that ability to kind of get curious and get adept quickly is so important for our space.
It is so important, and yet most organizations are still designing learning for compliance and not for capability. And I remember having a conversation with one of our very strong partners here, 360 Immersive, and they kind of talked about how the next wave of learning isn't about content delivery, it's about context discovery. And I know
Yeah.
you and I had an amazing conversation about a trip that you're going to be taking with your boys. Can we just bring that into this? Because who would have imagined an amazing journey with your family is going to be playing a role in tailoring learning for the moment that we're in?
Yeah, so I have two adult sons, and we are taking a trip to Japan in April. I just booked it, and so I started to look at, how do I plan this? I've never been. I don't know a lot about it. It's really my son's graduation gift, so it was his idea to go to begin with, and so I've started looking at it. And what I did is, of course, I went to my chat GPT and put in some information. Here's who I am. Here's who my kids are. Where should I go? What should I do? And it very quickly, like within moments, gave me a 10-day itinerary, which was fantastic. But what I also have to understand is, what is it leaving out? What are the dynamics that maybe aren't being introduced? And so obviously I will go back and tell them more about my interests, my son's interest, our budget, how we travel together, and it's going to continue to do that. But what it's really missing is that understanding of who I am. And that's the human element. And so at the same time, while I'm doing that, I'm putting out, calls and notes to friends. My best friend's mother grew up in Japan. And I said, hey, can she kind of give me some ideas of, cultural things that she knows me, right? So what are things that are important for me to know? So my point to this conversation is really to say that while certainly AI is going to take us a long way and very quickly, it we still need to have that human element, that understanding of who someone is, how they learn, how they experience, what is their experience, to truly make this a truly relevant, personalized experience that we know AI is very capable of helping us get there.
It's capable, but it doesn't understand the nuances of our human experience also, right? So
Yes.
it's so layered, and then you also lose those human connections that would make the experience you went through so enriching. Because imagine coming back and sharing, we went to that place you recommended, it was amazing, and then having that shared experience with one of your community members, right? I think we miss that if we just go pure AI, right? And I think for me, when I think about learning and development, and I think about all the things that we're able to do today, I used to think when I was a learning and development manager back in the day, it used to be, let's figure out a way to train the most amount of people in the quickest way to get it all done, right? Because it was like one size fits all or
Yes,
most, right? And then you
exactly.
would you would adjust it for their location that they're working, or their whether they're frontline or people managers, right, or people leaders. And I think now we're in an era where, can we agree, like it's one size fits one, right? Like I think with AI, we can move into adaptive learning, where what you mentioned, which was, it's not just so much that you ask the question in a prompt, you have to give more information to the AI, so that that promise of it's gonna give you what you need is actually, it comes to life, right? It's actually brought into the perspective of how is AI gonna help us? It's through giving it more information. But then that kind of makes me question where we're at, right? Like how much information is too much information to share with AIs? And so it brings me to the what people call the dark side of this revolution, right? We can talk about risks all day long. We can talk about how the lack of critical thinking, right? So the lack of thinking about readiness in your own career. And so you've led learning in so many different industries. And I think specifically what I noticed from your resume, your like long resume, Sandy, honestly, regulated industries
Mm.
like finance, like insurance, like banking, right? And I know these industries have been using artificial intelligence before we were talking about artificial intelligence like we are today. What do you see as the biggest risk of AI adoption in L&D, and how can learning leaders mitigate this?
I think one of the biggest risks is the whole notion of, the bias, then of course the mistakes that are made within AI, right? So that's, I think, an important piece to take a look at. But, that you have to couple that with the potentials of things like grand personalization at scale unprecedented, right? And this is something that our learners, our employees are expecting now. They've grown up, many of them, with Netflix, with Amazon, with all sorts of recommendations, right? So we're having that ability to do that. It does require that they understand a bit more about us, so that opening up of our talent systems is important. And with that, we have to mitigate, any risks around the confidentialities that are so critical in those spaces. But it allows us then to really look at adaptive learning at scale, which is something, again, we've never had abilities to do. So the trade-offs around the risks and the potential problems are there, and we have to protect ourselves from those. But the potentials of really understanding, like, who is it that's taking this learning, or who is it that's participating in this journey, and how do we really help them to map out a path that's most relevant for them and most productive for the organization. Those kinds of things are available to us in ways we've never had available to us before.
They are, right? And I think the opportunity is that some may disagree with me, but I believe that this is an opportunity to mitigate some of that bias using AI the right way, right? Because it's not just about the technical risk, the technology risk. For me, I also feel like it's about the cognitive risk, like the human not learning that humans are biased, period. Like you can't take that away. We make decisions fast, and that's how our brain is wired, that automatic processing, because we will risk outsourcing our thinking, right, to AI, and losing our intellectual fitness if we just relegate it to AI will handle that. But I think this is an opportunity for us as organizations who are, trying to build cultures of learning, right, strong cultures of learning into this age of AI. We have to kind of think about knowledge as less of, what's popular today, which is our TikTok sort of like bite-sized, and what I like to say here is like it's like the smoothie problem, right? We're blending all the knowledge into this quick 1 minute or 2 minute, digestible bite, but we're losing the chewing. We're forgetting that sometimes there is value in chewing on that knowledge, on understanding that knowledge from our own experiences and actually digging into it, right? I mean, what do you think about that? The conversation between AI helping us build learning versus the human actually going through the experience and learning that there does need to be behavior change.
I think they live together. They
Mhm,
live together side by side. And what I mean by that is AI is allowing us to create, to to use your words, small bite-sized learning. But it's not a module anymore. It's a help. It's that person sitting on your shoulder saying, "Oh, do this, not that," or "Try this," or "Oh, you have a quick question, let me help you and give you a quick answer to that." Right? So to some degree, it's, especially as we kind of move into hybrid working environments where people are working from home, or sometimes they're at a desk sitting next to someone who they don't know well, or, there's a lot of new ways that our people are showing up at work. This AI in many ways is kind of helping us to solve the person sitting next to you problem. Like when I was growing up, Frank sat next to me, and if I had a question, I'd lean over, and Frank, who'd been there for a year longer than me, could answer my question, right? Well, that's sort of not the situation as much anymore. So now we have that ability to get that in the flow of work responses that we need in order to do our work. But learning and growing is never going to change. How humans learn and grow is
mhm,
through experiences. How those experiences come to them is going to change, right? That's evolving as we speak, right? But the notion of reflecting, of learning, of trying something, failing at it, trying it again, succeeding, getting feedback, whether that feedback is coming from a person or whether that feedback is coming from AI, is all real, right? That's all part of how we learn as humans. So while it's changing the way this experience happens, it's not changing the complete result of that experience, if that makes sense.
it does make sense. And it just makes me think about how important it is to even think about, some may say, terms and maybe methodologies that have been used in the past, like the Bloom's taxonomy, right? Like when we think about how it's important to know the knowledge, but to really get what you're looking for, somebody has to move, beyond just the knowledge space and move into the cognitive space, right? Which means experiential learning, right? And then also to your point, VR, virtual reality, right? I always say, like, sometimes, when we think about learning and development, we have to take ourselves outside of the box of people need to learn this. I'm going to tell them. And I told them, now they got it, right? There are so many ways to communicate. And in the English language, just my language that I speak here in the United States, There are so many definitions for the same word that did the person actually get the information because you told it to them? Maybe not. And the only way to get beyond that gap of knowledge is to have that experience, to actually go through the process of experiencing it. And the beauty about our brains is that they don't know the difference between VR and real reality. That emotional experience still exists if you do it through VR. So I feel like that's an opportunity for us to use not only artificial intelligence, but other technologies like we're talking about virtual reality, augmented learning experiences to start to train brains, to start to train behavior change within our organizations faster. Because if we're really calling ourselves the change agents in organizations that we serve, then we have to figure out how, from a neurological perspective, right? How can we tap into this opportunity we have now with AI, right, Sandy?
Well, I was at another conference, and I ran into an old friend from a previous job, and I said, "Oh, so, what are you doing these days?" And she said, "Well, I'm working for a major medical technology company, and we are creating tools for surgeons to use." And I'm going to be speaking later about virtual reality because essentially what they did is they are using virtual reality to train surgeons on how to use this particular device within surgery. And what they've seen is an efficacy rating off the charts. So in the past, right, it would have been theoretical, and then, it would have been a very expensive training event for someone. You'd have to bring doctors in, observe surgery, take part in a surgery, etc. And they mitigate all of the risks to the patient during that time. But now through virtual reality, they're able to accelerate that learning process significantly. And to your point, it's experiencing it as if they are in the operating room, right? So that to me is an incredible example of how do you use virtual reality to, first of all, accelerate learning, decrease risk to lots of things, and also to improve the overall learning experience. So I think there's some incredible opportunities that we have right now. I want to go back to something you said earlier because I think there is something that is an important component for us to be thinking about right now, which is, we talked about sort of how people learn and how they experience on the job. And one of the things I'm seeing right now is what are the implications to early career entrance into organizations, right? Because in many of our organizations, certainly in the ones I've worked on, you hire interns or you hire those first year college graduates, and they're doing a lot of work that we are now thinking is maybe something that AI can be doing, right? So it's the research, it's the deck preparations, it's the graphing, it's the data analysis. It's that kind of work. And sometimes it's just the administration of putting things together, whether it's an experience or materials. And I am a little just paying attention to what does this mean for our early careerists, right? I have a son who's just entering the workforce, actually two, who are entering the workforce, and it worries me a little bit to think like what are our opportunities for them? And we're actually at D2L doing a study to look at that very specifically. So we're doing some work there to just pay attention to it. But it is something that, I don't have answers to it right now, but it's something that I do pay a lot of attention to because, to your point earlier, those experiences help us to, grow and develop. And
Mhm.
and how are we going to architect those experiences when we're giving much of that work to the AI agentic space?
Yes, yes. When we talk about elevating the level of leadership, because I feel like that's where we're going as humans, is we have to now become leaders in the scope of the work that we do. Because, like you said, the tasks can be taken care of, right? There's people always joke
Yes.
like, AI is not going to take your job. Somebody who knows how to use AI is going to take your job. But I'll even take it a step further. If you are doing your job like an AI would do your job, then your job is going to go away. So just think about your job. If you're just performing tasks and you're not having any, higher level thinking in the work that you're doing, you're not making any decisions, watch out, right? But also when we think about onboarding our entry level, right, staff, our entry level employees, I'm even thinking about what what are they calling them now? Gen Alpha, right? Being
Uh-huh.
I think they're calling them the anxious generation, right? And I think honestly, like the opportunity here with Gen Alpha is there's so much, I guess we could say, company knowledge that our veterans, right? Like I'm just thinking about how that used to be, right? Somebody has been here for like, 10 years. Oh my gosh, they know everything. I can't let them go. If you ask them a question, they know everything, right? But it's no more that. Now we can actually build AI agents, which is kind of interesting. We can build AI agents that people can prompt to have an answer to a question as that person would answer it, right? They get to learn this person's style, they get to learn their knowledge, and we can elevate our decision making process faster. But also on the flip side of that is what people are calling career grief, which is people who've spent years, maybe 4 to 5 years learning, whatever career they wanted to do, getting that degree, right? And then spent another 5 years moving up the ladder in the organization. And here comes AI. You've probably spent 7 or more years learning something that you're really good at that AI can do in a matter of seconds. And that's career grief that's happening right now. That's the work that here at Open Sesame we take very deep. We care about deeply. It's about upskilling. It's about reskilling. It's about reimagining what your workforce looks like because we know that the World Economic Forum mentioned that in 2030. 72 million new jobs are going to be created, right? But also 25% of the jobs we have today will be obsolete, will no longer be necessary, right? And that can be scary when you think about it. So for one of our last questions, right? I just kind of want you to think ahead, right? I'm thinking about where we're going. I'm thinking about us as learning professionals. I'm thinking about us all kind of coming together and embracing this work of imagining what our profession, right, would look like maybe 5, 10 years from now. Knowing what we know now, Sandy, what what will great L&D leaders do differently knowing what they know today?
I spent a lot of time both as a leader and focused on leaders and leadership development. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for us to not only develop solutions for our leaders, but also to help our leaders be better and as in the space that they are in. So I think, some of the things that are very different that I think are coming and actually are already here is, that ability to coach at scale, right? And to have that strong, scalable look at how to be a better leader. And it's whether it's, having a one-on-one and then getting real-time coaching back based on your own internal company's leadership principles. Or one organization I'm looking at is basically taking a lot of those very senior leaders, people who have spent 20, 25 years in the organization or building their career, and having them debrief in a way that is, very reflective, right? So that, again, you can pull from that knowledge now that we've never had abilities to do before. So I think it's in, first of all, helping our leaders be better leaders, helping our employees access information that they need to do their jobs at the time that they need it. So building into that flow of work and also meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
And again, all of this is able to be done now at scale in ways that we never had the ability to do before. Moving from the peanut butter of everybody gets the same amount at the same time in the same way
Mm-hmm.
to a truly clear, personalized growth path,
Yes.
that someone can have that's been architected based on who they are. And I think that's where we really need to be playing in right now. Um, Certainly there are lots of efficiencies that we can gain. And I think that, coming from the world of learning technology and education technology, I think for us, we're really looking at how do we meet this need of being more efficient and being more effective. And so, how do we design better programs quickly? How do we embed tools that are going to help do that?
Mm-hmm.
How do we embed tools that are going to take the efficiencies and, streamline that work? But also, how do we meet people where they are? And that's at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do is build that capability, build the potential, and help people be the best version of themselves.
Exactly, Sandy. Exactly. Yes. Help people become the best version of themselves. So we're going to move from one size fits most to one size fits one because we have access to artificial intelligence.
Yes.
There's such a huge rise for me in just thinking about how we can have AI augmented learning leaders. Like, why can't we just start thinking about how our learning leaders can augment themselves into the AI tools that we use, right? Keep thinking of all these custom GPTs. I need to start feeding these custom GPTs the way I think, my philosophy, the way I process information, right? Because someone can actually prompt my GPT and ask me questions, right? And start to learn how I learn and start to figure things out. And when we think about building an ecosystem that fits everybody's capacity, we're thinking about what we can call maybe our capability revolution, right? Like now we have access to that. Now we have the opportunity to personalize the learning like we have never been able to do it before, be more strategic with learning paths and not just saying, okay, this is for, I used to work for local government. So I just remember this so clearly. Okay, this is for the water department. And like everybody in the water department is going to learn this way. But like you mentioned, Sandy, it's not about giving people that peanut butter and saying everybody's going to enjoy this peanut butter and maybe jelly sandwich. Some people may be allergic to peanut butter, right? So can we get to the point where we actually understand that we're not just designing for those for like the group and just because you work in that department and they majority of them like peanut butter that you're gonna like it. No, it doesn't work like that, right? And so I'm excited about this opportunity. I think it's exhilarating. I think not only is it exhilarating, but anything that's exhilarating is also terrifying, right? If you've ever been on a roller coaster, it's fun, but also it's fun because you're a little bit scared. So for me, I feel like this is about redefining what success means for learning leaders. What does success actually mean? Does success mean the metrics of completions of training? How many people completed that training versus launched that training? Versus how maybe trust is built, maybe how did people adapt, maybe did you move metrics in terms of the OKRs you have in your organization based off of the learning that was provided to them, right? Can we get more creative with the measures, right, of learning?
Well, and I was remiss in not talking about the ability to look at data in such large scales now and to find information and stories that tell something very impactful about the results of the work that we've been doing. So in the past, I know that I've been saying it for years, like, what's the impact? Show me the impact to the organization. But I know that for many of us that are on this call today, you're limited in what you're available to use, right? And so the ability now to take data and look at, positing certain questions or saying like, hey, how did this impact this particular group versus that? Or what are we seeing from insights around this work that we've done? That is where some real power comes. And especially us as the learning and development professionals, being able to find those stories and tell those stories and share them is so powerful. And,
Mhm.
you said like you can be very daunting and intimidating. I'm a big believer, control what you can control. And right now, I can take control of what I know about AI. I mean, it's out there, it's available. It's pretty democratized information right now. And so I'm out there just sort of spending time writing custom GPTs and looking at where I can, use this and develop myself and where I can tell stories and help others and coach them around this work as well. So control what you can control here. And I think there's a lot of it right now available to us.
There is a lot, and I love how you said that. Like, be the model, right? You also be in the game. You let people see how you're embracing AI, how
Yes.
you're taking time to learn from it. I think the future learning teams will be more like, what I love watching the show, The Morning Show on
Uh-huh.
Apple TV. And I think like we're gonna be like a newsroom, like the control room. We're gonna be like an innovation lab, maybe, right? We have to kind of pivot.
Without the drama.
We
Without the
with
drama.
Oh my gosh, without the drama and yeah, yeah, all the things that happen behind the scenes and all these amazing shows we love. But I love how you brought in that analytical story-driven approach because that's what the data does. Powering our AI approach to learning is really about understanding the data behind it, but also making sure it's tied to the humanity of it. We can't future-proof people, but we can human proof the future. That's kind of how I always like to think about it, right? You can't think about the future too much, but you can always have that anchor. You can have your ethos on, I care about the people, period. Now what are we going to do, right? So, Sandy, as we are wrapping up this conversation, I'm just reminded that AI's real power isn't just about replacing learning, it's about revealing it, right? It's about making sure that everybody not only gets to see themselves, but they get to learn at the pace that they can learn and also bring their own experience in there so they can have some muscle memory, right? Some experiential learning. And if we get this right, we're actually not only going to be building a smarter workforce. I think we're going to be building a smarter and wiser world. Like we're all in this together, right? Every single person who works in every single organization is part of us here as humans. And if us in the workplaces did our best as learning leaders, this might sound like a challenge to learning and development leaders. What are you doing to elevate the level of humanity in your organization so that everybody, like Sandy said so well, becomes the best version of themselves? And so, Sandy, I want to ask you just as a final takeaway, when you think big picture in terms of, the future of learning, the future of humanity, and our, continuous learning ability, right? Like we have to be continuous learning to survive as humans. What do you think about that? Where are we headed in this era?
I think, we always look at sort of what are the most important sort of skills for people to have or et cetera. And I would say there are two things that really resonate with me. One is resiliency. So things are going to change and just be okay with that and know that, the more you can adapt to those changes, the more you can have that sort of growth mindset that will um, lead you forward through all of this. And then the second one is stay curious, ask the questions. And, this is a unique tool or set of tools that allows us to ask those curious questions and then ask questions on top of that. What more do I need to know? What questions have I not asked that I should? So stay curious and stay engaged. It's very easy to get overwhelmed, to get worried. I would say keep focused on, the future because it's right out there for us. And I think this is such a unique time for us to really be out there, staying engaged with it, staying curious, staying resilient, and just looking towards the future and saying, like, this is a really cool opportunity. And very few times in history do you get to be in
Yes.
this space, right? So embrace it.
I love that. Yes, like what are you going to be able to tell future humans, right? I was there when AI was adopted, right? So be in the game, get to play in the game. And when you mentioned your key takeaway, it just got me thinking about two books like right away. Like actually I have a lot of favorite books, but these two books, right? The first one you mentioned was really about staying resilient and it reminded me of Angela Duckworth's wisdom on grit, right? Really kind of
Yes.
honing yourself and making sure like it's not
They're like
always
right
over.
over there.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. I think every single learning leader probably has these books. And then the
Mhm.
second book, I don't know if it's a book, but it's actually a speech that was given by Steve Jobs. Stay curious, right? When we think about the opportunity to advance humanity, when we think about the insights that we can learn from playing with artificial intelligence and seeing where it can take us into the future, you have to stay curious. You can't just say, "Well, this is how we've always done it," or "I have the answer." Stay curious. You don't know what the next thing could bring, so you just have to stay in the game. What an incredible conversation, Sandy. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to speak with you again, in any capacity. Absolutely love sharing insights with you. I am going to be checking with you to see which conferences you go to because those sound like the kind of conferences I need to be going to. And so your perspective and your insights about how humans can stay, human in this evolution of learning has been so amazing. Thank you for your time.
Lisa, thank you so much. This was so fun. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
it definitely was fun. So for you, all of y'all, embracing this conversation right now, I hope that if you could take just one thing out of this, that you will learn that AI doesn't think for us. It helps us think better, right? And I think our job as humans is as learning leaders, right? So remember the challenge, right? What are you doing to elevate the level of humanity within your organization? Think about how you're designing for that to create an environment where your humans in your organization can see themselves as all one, right? How technology can help you do that, how it can help learning be more enhanced in your organization. And not only do that, but also think about how the future of work is going to be based off of the information that you're relaying in your organization. So with that, once again, I'm Lisa Wisner. I am the Talent and Workplace Culture Portfolio Lead here at Open Sesame. I just absolutely love having these conversations about the future of learning, and I hope you will stay connected with us. And remember to always keep learning, keep staying at the forefront, and keep using technology wisely because your future self depends on it. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thanks, Lisa. Bye bye.